Hey, how we doing? Welcome back to Right Now Leaders. My name is Andre Early. Today I have once again two of my little brothers, and then I actually have one additional one that will change most likely the dynamic or at least the conversation. But nonetheless, fellas, just introduce yourselves once again.
I can start again. Win Brown.
Solomon Thomas.
Joshua Robinson.
Fellas, welcome to a conversation. I think today we're going to talk about some financial literacy. I know Solo, in my previous employment situation, I was able to assist with an initiative called GLAD, which is Greeks Learning to Avoid Debt. Uh, for those that know, you know. Uh, and that whole conversation was, of course, geared towards college students and how to navigate maybe bypassing applying for credit cards at such a young age or things of that nature. What is your take on financial literacy when it comes to early career hires?
I think it's a really important topic at all stages, not necessarily just early career hires. A lot of times I feel like people wait until they have a job, they have an income to start learning how to manage their money. I actually think the conversation should start way before that, a lot younger, which is, in one of my roles. I have a non-for-profit. That's something that we target and something we work on. We work with students we work with college students, but we have begun working with high school students as well as middle school students just to bring in that financial literacy conversation a bit earlier, because one thing we focus on is like building wealth and investing, like particularly retirement. And whenever you think about investing, the time horizon, time is what's really on your side. So the earlier you start, the much more the returns will be.
Right.
So targeting folks earlier is important. But in terms of like early career financial literacy, I think it's important to know how to manage your finances, but because it's a skill it's a learned skill that is developed over time. A lot of times folks might make mistakes early and then have to course correct later on, and that can just be very challenging.
Okay.
Very challenging regarding debt, credit, a whole number of things. But I think learning financial literacy early on can help folks navigate that entire situation.
What you got, Jr.?
I agree with everything Solo said, but want to hit on the fact that it starts earlier than just when you first start your career. And so before I went to college, my mother actually got me a credit card. She taught me how to use it. Like, this is for emergencies only, and every month we'll pay it off completely. And that'll help you build your credit as you go through college, so that when you do start full time, when you do move to a different city, your credit is you already have a foundation as far as your credit goes. And then something I did when I first started working is I contributed up to the amount that my employer matches for my 401k. And I think starting that early kind of gets you used to seeing the money going from your check, see the money going to your 401k without, I guess, getting used to the full amount. So those are two things that I did early on that I think will pay off down the line.
Oh, okay. So before I get to you, Josh, I wanted to go back because you said your mother, pretty much taught you, the importance of spending and saving and things of that nature. I remember a conversation. It wasn't too much in detail with my parents. However, credit card for an emergency purposes. However, some financial institutions are very aggressive when they hit those college campuses.
Yeah.
So if you don't have that foundation at home, I don't want to assume, but I'm pretty sure that conversation happened with you too, Solo, right?
No, actually, not so much.
Really?
I kind of always was interested in money and finances myself, so I kind of taught myself a lot of things. Growing up, I always heard the messaging like, yeah, we can't afford that, or like, that's too expensive. We got food at home, all these other things. But I think having some of those habits instilled in me early kind of helped me to shape my own spending habits, right? I was never, and still to this day, I'm not somebody who goes out and gets something the second I want it. It's more like a lot of people have trouble with a concept called delayed gratification, right? Whereas they think about something, they want it, they just got paid. Oh, time for me to get those new shoes. Time for me to get that new bag. Time for me to get the ticket to that concert, etc. Me personally, if it's, a bigger purchase, I'm like, okay, I want this thing, but then I'm like, okay, do I need this thing? Right? A lot of times people have trouble distinguishing between wants and needs, and that's how folks can spend more than they want to or go over budget. I've never been the type to budget because my mom also does not like to budget. There were times in our lives where things were a bit tighter, where my mom had to budget, but because she didn't like budgeting, she just was more so, let's spend modestly. That way, I don't even have to worry about budgeting because I already know that we're not overspending. And that's how I operate now. I don't have a budget, but I trust myself not to overspend. Like I guess kind of.
Yeah, you're falling into a very small percentage.
Yeah. I have very different financial habits and spending habits than most people. I take the idea of like pay yourself first in terms of like my money going into my investments, my money going into my retirement, my money going into my 401k. It gets split out into a bunch of different accounts first, so I know I'm hitting my savings goals, and then the rest of it, then I give myself like enough to cover rent and then like other expenses for the month in my checking account, and then the rest goes into like a rainy day fund.
Got it.
But yeah, I don't really spend that much money, honestly. It's just I spend more now because I make more now, but you know, go out to eat every now and again, get new clothes every now and again, but that's about it. Vacations. I love trips. I love
Well,
traveling.
yeah, you're fun. Okay, I got you. Josh.
I think it's important that we have to think about how debt works for us. I think it's important to erase the stigma that debt is a bad thing. I think when you're going into debt on things that don't necessarily work for you is where it could become troublesome, right? So for me at least, like I always grew up like thinking like credit card was just like a bad thing. Like, oh, I'm gonna have to owe these people a lot of money, yada yada yada. But then as I got older, it's like okay, a credit card is the first way you can increase your credit score, and your credit score is a metric that they use to assess, you know, how diligent you are with paying down your debt, which goes into how much money would a bank be willing to lend you. Maybe it could be for a home, it could be for a potential project. And so I was like, okay, like obviously I don't like credit card, but I need it. So how can I utilize this tool in a way that benefits me? So for me personally, like I don't use my debit card. I only use my credit card to pay for things. But I use my credit card in a way that's like, okay, if I know I'm making a big purchase, $500, right? For example, I could use cash or I could just use my credit card and just pay down my credit card, right? Because this is gonna be kind of like my history of showing to creditors. They're like, hey, I can pay down my debt. So I use my credit card in a way that's like I only charge to my credit card what I would actually spend of my own money. And I think the fallacy is like a credit card should be used to buy things that you otherwise wouldn't be able to afford. And for me, it's like I use my credit card to buy things that I can afford so that, you know, going down the line, it increases my access to other means of capital, just because I kind of have a payment history that shows that I'm credit worthy. So That's kind of what I would say.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I kind of want to your point, Josh, about the fallacy of, putting things on credit that you can't afford. I agree with that 100%. And I think a lot of it goes back to the conversations that we have or the conversations that we overhear growing up, right, in our households. I feel like a lot of times with kids, they're not included in like money conversations. Oh, that's adult conversations. Like
Yeah.
you don't need to hear this. Go upstairs, go read your book, what have you. But I think it's important to teach kids about money early on and how it works. And a lot of times, people from less fortunate communities, they have trouble with debt. They have trouble with navigating their finances. Their financial literacy in your household might not even be, up to par with where, folks end up learning and growing later on down the line. So it's hard, one, not having money conversations when you're younger, because then you're supposed to just figure it out as you get older. That's not how things tend to work. But I say that for like a lot of minority communities, because in a lot of the other communities, they have these conversations with their youth, with their kids. They have these conversations around the dinner table, talking about business, talking about credit, talking about money. This is a very common topic in certain communities, and that's why these kids, they come out the gate already knowing, okay, as soon as I turn 18, I open my IRA right away, because there are certain rules that, an IRA is a tax benefited account. Like, say somebody knows they want to get into real estate later on when they get a job or buy a piece of real estate, you can actually use the money in your IRA to buy a property. A lot of people think, oh, I have to wait till retirement to touch my retirement savings. You can actually, if you have your IRA established for 5 years, you can use whatever returns tax free to buy your first property. Like, there's a lot of cool tips and tricks that some people know and other people don't, and that's because of what they're exposed to a lot of times when they're younger.
Oh my gosh. So, well, you know what? Go ahead and expound on that more, because you're dealing with exposure, and then then you also have to tie in like accessibility. But
I think on that point, I think it's important, even for myself, outside of finances, outside of work, just to be curious about certain things and always ask questions on things that you don't know. So I think curiosity is the thing that you should always have and always expand upon. But also, when you're going to ask these questions, look for people with fruit on the tree. So you wouldn't go talk to somebody who has thousands of dollars in credit card debt and, wouldn't have a productive conversation with you about the topic you're curious about. Always look for people who are an example or lead the way in whatever you're curious about. So I say, one, be curious, and two, look for people with fruit on a tree.
One thing I will say about that, like I like the idea of looking for people with fruit on the tree, but I would say, like, don't necessarily avoid those other conversations, because I truly believe you can learn something from every conversation you have, and even from people without fruit on the tree, like they're thousands of dollars in credit card debt, you can learn from their mistakes.
oh,
Right?
absolutely.
You can always learn if somebody's not doing well. You can learn, like, okay, what happened? Where did you go wrong? And then maybe they already know, like, this is how I would avoid it. So you can also learn from people without necessarily fruit on the tree. But I do also like, obviously, you look towards examples and how do I follow your footsteps. But I can also avoid certain mistakes as well. And that's why I love talking to people with more experience, have mentors. It's always important to have mentors, because they can help you along your journey and help you navigate certain potholes that they fell into.
No, I definitely agree with all that, because even from a mentoring perspective, it's just like you want individuals. I've always said, you know what? In order for you to get to where you think you want to go, you got to be in the room with the people that are already there. And you have to be, for the most part, uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. and being in those rooms and challenging and asking those questions. I think a lot of us are afraid to ask those types of questions, or you know what, the topics never came up at home because it does start, at home. And if you don't know, then hell, uh, you need to go find out somewhere. This goes back, to the conversation, I guess, a little like earlier on the way up. Slight pivot as it relates to wealth building and preparing for the next generation. I would like to think that my generation is doing something for you guys, but apparently, due to pricing and things of that nature, the real estate market is kind of tough for you guys.
It definitely is. It definitely is. But I think, like, to that point, all right, if I'm looking to buy a property, obviously, unless you're just blessed in that regard, like, I can't go out and buy a house for, let's say, $100,000 all cash, right? So then you have to kind of get creative. Well, maybe I can put $20,000 down cash, but the rest is going to have to be debt, right? But in terms of, let's say I want to sell this house in 2 years for $200,000. Would it make sense for me to put in all of my money, would it make sense for me to put in more equity of my money, my own money, or would it make sense for me to use more of somebody else's money? The bank, should I take out more debt in order to leverage more return? So I think it's interesting to see how, like, the perspective of how we think about debt and how it can be used for us. Like, in terms of if it's an investment, more often than likely, it makes sense to use the more leverage you can of somebody else's money, the greater your returns will be. Versus, like, if I were to go into a potential investment and use all of my money, it's like my returns are definitely going to be lower just because I'm cash all in. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I think it's very important to think about, just when you're talking about debt, how does this work in relation to what I want for the future? Is this debt going to yield a return necessarily that benefits me? Whether that's an intrinsic return or if it's actually like, am I going to make money off this thing? Is me going into debt going to pay off for me 10 years from now? And so it's like trying to avoid as much as possible going into debt on things that are just, as like, the moment you go into debt for it, just a sunken cost. Like a car, for example, or it could be like a TV, or some shoes or something. Like, those are sunk costs, and then you're going to be stuck paying on them long term, and the value of that, whatever you bought, isn't even worth the debt that you put on it. And so it's like, how do we be strategic about the things that we are going into debt for? Are these things working for the benefit of my future? And I think that's kind of how I like to approach, thinking about the concept of debt.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Like, there's good debt and there's bad debt, right? So obviously you want to avoid the bad debt, leverage the good debt where you can and where you see opportunity. The concept that you were referring to of, using other people's capital to get assets, I think it's a really good one that more people should look into. Leverage finance, because institutions use this all the time. Like, people use money to make money, and that's a very common thing. It's a high level concept that you have to do research, you have to understand, you have to learn about, but it can be very powerful. But I don't want to say that without addressing the fact that there is risk involved. Of course, there's always risk in anything. Usually when you're using other people's money, they're going to charge you a rate, an interest rate, a percentage. So you got to do the math of, like, okay, the risk involved there's always the risk that the investment doesn't go well. You have to pay that back anyways. You have to pay it back with the interest. That's if things don't go well. But also make sure that if things do go well, that the interest is not taking so much away from the profits that it didn't even make sense for you to go into the debt, and you may have as well used equity. So it's an equation, it's a balance, just like anything. But it definitely is a concept that more people should look into and do your own research and figure out how to balance these things, because the finance thing, there are things that are simple, and then there are things that are complex. And the bigger the money gets, sometimes things get a little bit more complex. So just as long as you're educated, you know what you're getting into. Always do your research beforehand. That's always what I recommend. Do your own research as well.
So I'm just curious, do you guys have these types of conversations like within your professional networks, with your peers?
Personally,
With each other, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I love talking about money. I love talking about it with my friends, with older folks. I don't know as much with coworkers. Sometimes with coworkers, as well. Things can get a little at certain organizations. I guess some organizations are more transparent. Some organizations are more opaque. So sometimes people don't like talking about their pay. But I think these conversations are super important. And sometimes money conversations, especially in certain communities, are viewed as taboo. And a lot of times it can come from like generational trauma in the sense of there's a bit of embarrassment because I don't have it. I don't even want to talk about it because I don't have it. Right? So, and I'm not educated on the topic, so I can't even have the conversation. So I'm never going to even broach the topic, even if I have that curiosity, like you were saying earlier. I think I always want to get across the point of empowering people to, even if you don't have it, even if you're not educated on the topic, participate in these conversations. Because that's the only way you're going to get that education. And that's the only way you're going to, not the only way, but that's a great way to figure out those next steps. Leverage your community. There's a lot of knowledge and power in your community.
I definitely feel you on that. And, going back to something you said, then I'm thinking about my history, that the whole generational trauma when it comes to finances, how bad were we with trying to keep up with the Joneses? Are we like literally outspending what we bring in just to, give off the persona that we're doing all right? And I always had an issue with that. I chuckle now that, I see, young heads coming out of college, they first real job, and, they're getting some money. It's good. First thing they want to do is buy the top of the line vehicle. Never made sense to me, because it was one of those things. I guess the way that I was raised, I always wanted to build up to something, so I didn't mind, the hoopty, just getting around, because at the end of the day, you're only trying to get from A to B, and who are you trying to impress? But then you go into debt, trying to keep up with others, putting on a persona like that. So that's another component of how we navigate these financial waters.
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't feel like I'm pressed to keep up with the Joneses, just because I know, like, for me personally, what I want to do in the future, and what that may take, maybe the risk that I'm willing to take on myself, like, it's gonna require me, like, debt is just one less thing I have to worry about, and the less I have to owe to somebody else, my time, my resources, the more I can pour back into myself. And as we're mentioning, like, debt can be a tool. It also can be an inhibitor to progress and growth. And so, I mean, I try to think of debt as a way as, like, if you owe somebody, they're always going to be, knocking at your door trying to get that back, and it's going to cost you more to pay back what you originally owed.
Absolutely.
And so, we see, like, credit card solicitation. Like, anytime people are offering something, usually there's a price associated with that. So I kind of look at them as like, nah, I'm actually good. Like, you're trying to get something from me. But in actuality, like, I probably more than likely have everything I need. And so my thought is just like, if I can't afford it, then I just don't need it. And I'll wait till I can afford it. If I never can afford it, then, that's just part of life. You just got to accept that.
I think on that point, you got to really look in the mirror. Instead of trying to compare yourself to someone else, ask yourself, what do I want? And how do I get to a point where I can get what I want? Versus saying, oh, Dre got this super cool car. I want that car too, so I'm gonna go and spend money I don't have to get it. If I do want that car, then it's time for me to look in the mirror and say, what are the steps I need to take to get this car? And I want it because it's something that's for me, and it's very, like, to what Josh said, intrinsic, versus doing it just to flex what I have, or doing it just to pop out and say, hey, look at me, everybody. It's more so I kind of view it as I do everything because this is what I would do regardless who saw me doing it. And so that's kind of how I look at things. And yeah, I just think comparing yourself can put you in a position that inhibits your growth, like Josh said and Solo said. So yeah, no comparison.
And you know what they say, comparison is the thief of joy, right? But
I didn't want to say it. I was going to say it, but
my bad. Didn't mean to steal your thunder. But no, to that point, I also think it's important bringing it back to that concept of community, is that reinforcing messaging. A lot of times, folks aren't surrounded by voices who are like, yeah, you know, what's best for you all in your time, like, think about what you want. A lot of times people are caught up in groups, in friend groups, like, oh, I just got the newest thing. Oh, my man's just got it. I gotta get it. And I just go about and go out and get it. And whatever I gotta do to get it, like, I'm gonna get it, whatever. I'll take out the debt, I'll take out the loan. Like, they're not thinking about the future. They're not thinking about the repercussions. They're not thinking about down the line. They're thinking about the here and the now. And right now, I want that car because my buddy got that car, and now he got all these people looking at him like, oh, he's the man. I want to be the man. Let me get it right now. So I think it's like, it's hard when you're surrounded by voices who are kind of encouraging certain behaviors, and it can extrapolate to any context, not just finance. But you really sometimes, like JR said, have to look in the mirror, shut the voices off. It's a hard thing to do, especially when you're in a friend group like this, and we're having a very different conversation about, like, bro, you ain't got that car yet. Like, what's going on? Like, it's like, nah, don't worry, I got it next week. Like, there are very different rooms that certain people are in, and very different messaging that they hear. And I think it's important for people to figure out, like, what's for me?
Right.
Like, who am I outside of this? Because this could all be gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that's interesting. Like, when me and my friends, we chopping it up, and let's say, like, they want to do something, and, like, one of us can't afford it, or, like, or maybe say I can't afford it. And they'd be like, we'll say something like, oh, I got to stay down right now. Or my friends will just be like, I just stay down. And to us, that's like our lingo for saying, like, don't even worry about it. Just stay low. Like, don't overextend yourself trying to do something that you might not be in the position to. But it's all good, though. Like, just stay down for right now, and we'll be around. Like, we'll be able to do something together or whatnot. And so sometimes I'll just go through periods where I'm like, all right, I'm staying down right now. Like, I'm going to just chill, kind of block out all the distractions. Like, I'm not on the internet looking at clothes, and that's what I like to do. I like to shop sometimes. So I'm not on the internet looking at clothes. I'm not paying attention to things that, like, vacations and all that. Like, I'm staying down. I'm focused on, like, if I got an immediate threshold that I'm trying to reach, like, that's what I'm worried about. I got my livable expenses that I keep in check, and I'm staying down. That's the only thing I'm focused on. And so until I reach that point, then I can start to, live a little bit more as far as, like, what the things I like to do. But for the most part, it's just a matter of, like, again, like we've been mentioning, looking yourself in the mirror, being honest with yourself, and, just asking, are my spending habits, in correlation with, like, what I want for myself, whether that's 6 months from now, a year from now, 10 years from now, or even tomorrow, you know what I mean? So that's just kind of like the reality of it, is just being honest with yourself.
That's what's up. Jerry, you good?
yeah.
Oh,
I feel
okay.
like I started the loop on this
Okay.
one, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So Well, bring this back around. So, Solo, from time to time, you're out, probably out, recruiting or, speaking engagements and things of that nature. What are some of the helpful tips you can share with, your younger brothers and sisters as they are about to step out and start their journey as well?
Definitely. I think, and this is something we tell our students all the time, is figure out. I think it's a good thing to do. It is a good exercise to have a budget, to build a budget. I know earlier I said I don't budget. That's just me personally, but I think it's a great exercise to do, right? Say you're graduating college, you ideally, you kind of want to have a job lined up. You know what your salary is going to be, right? Now, a lot of people will look at that number and be like, oh, that's my salary. Factor in taxes, because Uncle Sam going to get you.
Uncle Sam real.
Uncle Sam going to get you. So factor in taxes. Okay, what's my take-home pay? All right, this is my take-home pay. Now, what do I want to do? Am I trying to live somewhere? Obviously, you need to live somewhere. So people like the option. Some people like the option of going back home. Other people, they got to figure out where they want to live. So if you're in the second bucket, you got to figure out what you can spend. They say spend somewhere between no more than 30% of your income on your living situation. So that's a general guideline that some folks try to stay to. So that's going to be a fixed expense, your monthly rent, right? And then you have a certain other percentage that you want to keep for, groceries, your bills, other fixed expenses. Then probably have a certain percentage towards living, right? In terms of okay, go out to get food, kind of your fun part of your budget. And then you have a certain percentage towards saving, right? Whether that be your retirement, your investing, your savings, your rainy day fund. But that's kind of how I break down an overall budget concept. Figure out those numbers, figure out percentages, and then you can tweak whatever works best with your situation. Another thing that I say is start investing early. Investing is a habit, right? It's not something you do one time and it's done. I mean, there are set it and forget it methods, but investing is very much so a habit, a habitual practice that we encourage people to start early because time is on your side, your money will grow with time, et cetera, et cetera. So whether that be opening an individual retirement account, an IRA, while you're younger and your income is not over the limit, we always suggest the Roth IRAs. There's a lot of tax advantages to a Roth IRA. But once you start your career, like JR did, first day, open up that 401k. Start that investing because that'll pay off dividends down the line. A lot of people, they're 65 years old. That's in 45 years. Why am I worried about that right now? Trust me.
Just for the record, those years go by kind of fast.
Trust me.
Just saying.
If you give yourself a head start, you're only setting yourself up. You're only helping yourself out. It's that concept of delayed gratification again. You could have all your check in take-home pay and not provide any distributions elsewhere, but are you really setting yourself up for success? You always want to be setting yourself up for success. And then, just in general, be modest with your expenses. Don't try and keep up with the Joneses. You don't need every new pair of Jordans that come out. You don't need to go to Carbone every weekend. If you're in the dating pool, that can be a little expensive depending on who you are. But try and understand, try and figure out a budget for yourself and try and stick to that.
I think my advice would be a little bit shorter and it would be more career focused. I would say that early on in your career, regardless of where you go, you're going to start at the entry level. So you'll be making less than, I guess, everybody else in your group. I would focus less on, especially early career, what you're making, and more so on the skills that you're building and then the network that you're building as well. Because that'll pay dividends later on. Like once you get in your 30s, I feel for me personally, that's when I'll be earning like the majority of, or this when I'll really start earning, I guess, a quote unquote real money. So I guess right now, while I'm early in my career, I'm focused on building the skills that I would need for that time and then the network as well. Because you never know where you'll end up or who will end up where. And having a strong network, and this is going back to the first episode, but having a strong network will allow you to get to places where you couldn't without the network. So focus on skills, focus on network, and less on money, especially early on in your career. That's what I've been doing.
That's what's up.
I think I would say just set financial goals. So let's say you got $5 in your account and you're trying to make it to 10. Like, don't drop below $5 till you make it to 10. And then once you make it to 10, tell yourself like, okay, I'm not gonna drop below $10. You know what I mean? And like investing is one thing, but I think also just being disciplined with how you save and set goals, like that goes a long way. And so for me, it's like, if I know I have a certain savings threshold, I don't even think about dropping below that level. So to me, it's like, again, if my threshold is $10 and I got $15 in my account, I really, in my mind, only have $5. You know what I mean? So I'm not gonna drop below 10 if I don't have to. And so theoretically, each time if I'm setting a new threshold and I'm not spending below that threshold, like if I'm enjoying my life and I'm not dropping below my threshold, I should be saving money and like without even having to sit here and budget everything out. I just know, okay, this is my new threshold. I'm not dropping below, and I'm only gonna spend what I have in between. So if I'm down to $11, I'm just gonna chill. I'm not gonna spend below, what I've set for myself. And like I just think not underscoring the power of just saving your money goes a long way. Aside from just like getting into more complex topics of like investing and whatnot. I mean, just telling yourself, okay, I got this much money, I'm not gonna drop below this threshold. Let's let it rock. So for me, that's kind of how I like to think about my money, at least. Just setting those goals for myself.
Yeah, and I like the idea of goal setting because it's kind of hard to get somewhere without a destination in mind. And a lot of times it's about the journey, but if you have a goal, you have something you're working towards. You're not kind of just floating. You kind of have once you have a destination, then you can start building a roadmap on how do I get there, right? So I think that setting goal is very important because sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes in that early career, people can feel a little lost. Sometimes people feel like, okay, I got the job, like now I'm focused on building the skills, like I'm doing the job, but like what's next? Like what else is out there? And maybe that tends to come, a few years into it, but for some people it can happen sooner. So just having goals is really important.
Well, I will definitely say the conversations have to start early, because to your point, the goal, the overall goal has to be set. Of course, there will always be some nuances, some obstacles, and some exits as you're trying to get to your goal while you're on that journey. But as long as we are focused, I like the whole concept of staying disciplined. I don't think we do that enough because of undue or outside influences. But nonetheless, as long as we're focused, I think we'll be okay. Now, I will say this. I definitely enjoy these conversations, especially with the younger generations, because I actually, take notes and learn a few things myself. And I think from time to time, you guys, will learn something from
Absolutely.
from
Every
me
time.
and
Every time.
my my exposure / mistakes life's lessons. So, but that's what's up, fellas. Thank you once again for coming. This has been an informative discussion because I don't think it's happening as much as it should, especially with the way that the markets are fluctuating right now. And, as a matter of fact, over the past few weeks, I haven't even looked at my investments because that's just too nerve wracking right now. So we're gonna we just gonna let it ride. We just gonna let it ride. But thank you for having this conversation. We are what are we again? We are the EIEG group, and I'm sitting here with some right now leaders. Awesome. Thank you again. I look forward to the next conversation and the next topic. You know me, it'll just come out of the air somewhere. But thank you for this opportunity, and see you next time.